The door creaked open, and the millionaire froze. Inside the dim conference room, a janitor sat hunched over a stack of heavy books, lit only by the weak glow of a cracked phone flashlight. The cleaner didn't even notice him at first. His lips were moving, whispering words from the page like prayers. William Harrington, the man who owned this building and half the block it stood on, had expected to find an empty room. Instead, he found Marcus Carter, one of the night crew, studying law books in the dark. For a long moment, William said nothing. He simply watched, his irritation building. The kid wasn't cleaning. He wasn't mopping or dusting. He was sitting at a company table, with company lights off, doing something that had nothing to do with his job. Harrington's first instinct was to snap, to demand answers, maybe even fire him on the spot. But something made him pause. Burning the midnight oil, huh? William's deep voice suddenly filled the room. Marcus jolted upright, his pen skidding across the page. His chair screeched against the floor as he leapt to his feet. Wide-eyed, heart-pounding. He knew that voice. Everyone in the building did. It was the voice of the man whose name was etched in brass on the lobby wall. "Mr. Harrington, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean—" Marcus's words tumbled over themselves. He shoved books into his backpack with trembling hands, panic rising like fire in his chest. "This is it. I'm finished. One mistake and I'm done." But Harrington didn't shout. He stepped into the room slowly, shutting the door behind him. The click of the latch echoed louder than any words. His sharp eyes swept over the table, taking in the battered textbooks, the scrawled notes, the phone propped against a mug for light. He folded his arms. "Law?" Harrington's voice was flat but not mocking. "You're studying law?" Marcus froze. He could lie. He could claim it was nothing, just something he found, just passing time. But the truth was written all over the pages. He drew in a shaky breath. "Yes, sir, I want to be a lawyer someday." The room went silent. Marcus expected laughter, maybe scorn. He'd heard it before from neighbors, classmates, even his old boss at the grocery store. A janitor? A lawyer? Don't make me laugh. His jaw clenched. He braced himself. But Harrington didn't laugh. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing at the titles: constitutional law, criminal procedure, civil rights litigation. Heavy books, the kind law students struggled with. And here they were in the hands of a cleaner working minimum wage. "And you do this here? After hours?" Harrington asked. Marcus nodded, his throat dry. "Yes, sir. It's the only time I've got. At home it's too noisy. My sisters are still little, and we don't have good lights. Here, at least I can think." Harrington studied him in silence, his face unreadable. Marcus's chest tightened with dread. Every second stretched like an hour. He's going to fire me. Maybe even have me escorted out. Then what? How do I pay rent? How do I feed Mom and the girls? "I know it's not allowed," Marcus added quickly, desperation seeping into his voice. "But I can't stop. I can't give this up. My mom, she worked herself sick, and she lost her job when no one stood up for her. I don't want to just clean up after people for the rest of my life. I want to fight for folks like her, people who don't have a voice." The words spilled out raw, too honest to hide. He wanted to bite them back, but it was too late. They were out now, hanging in the air between him and one of the most powerful men in the city. Harrington's gaze flickered to the notebook lying open on the table. Without asking, he reached down and pulled it toward him. He flipped through the pages slowly. Marcus's handwriting filled every line. Definitions, case notes, flowcharts of trials, quotes from Supreme Court rulings. There were underlined passages, highlighted sections, even messy sketches of courtrooms. "You did all this on your own?" Harrington finally asked. "Yes, sir," Marcus said, forcing himself to stand tall despite the trembling in his hands. "No classes, no tutors. Just books I can borrow, the library when I can, and the internet if I've got a few dollars left for data." He hesitated, then added softly, "I'm saving to take the LSAT one day." Harrington closed the notebook gently and slid it back across the table. For the first time, his expression shifted. Something softer. Something Marcus hadn't expected. He tapped the cover once with his finger. "Most men in your shoes would have given up already," he said, "but you're still fighting." Marcus didn't answer. He didn't trust his voice not to crack. Harrington studied him for another long moment, then leaned against the table, arms crossed. "You really think you can pull this off? That a janitor can become a lawyer?" Marcus lifted his chin. Fear still churned in his stomach, but a spark of defiance burned in his eyes. "I don't just think it, sir. I know it. It'll take me longer. It'll cost me more, but I'll get there. Because I have to." For the first time, William Harrington smiled, not mockingly, but almost in disbelief. He had spent decades around men who had every advantage and still squandered it. And here was this kid cleaning his floors at night, fighting tooth and nail for something most people took for granted. The silence stretched again. The only sound was the faint hum of the city outside the windows. And in that moment, two worlds collided. One of wealth and privilege, one of struggle and grit. Neither man knew it yet. But this chance encounter was about to change both of their lives forever. William Harrington had been in countless negotiations. He'd stared down CEOs, bankers, even politicians, and always come out on top. But this was different. Standing across from this young man in a faded janitor's uniform, clutching battered textbooks like they were gold, Harrington felt something he didn't often feel: respect. Still, he wasn't about to let it show too easily. He straightened, fixing Marcus with the kind of look that made seasoned executives sweat. "You know what would happen if most bosses caught you doing this, don't you?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. His voice was steady now. He had nothing left to lose. "They'd fire me. Maybe call it stealing company time." "Exactly." Harrington let the word hang in the air. Marcus swallowed hard. He thought of his mother, still working days at a laundromat despite her aching joints. He thought of his two younger sisters, one of them needing new shoes for school, the other tugging at his sleeve every night to read her a story. If he lost this job, there'd be nothing left to fall back on. But then Harrington surprised him again. Instead of calling security, instead of demanding his badge and keys, he pulled out one of the heavy chairs at the table and sat down. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "All right," Harrington said. "Tell me something. Why law? Why not business or medicine? Or any of the 1,000 other things a smart young man could chase?" Marcus hesitated. No one had ever asked him that question seriously before. "Not like this. My mom," Marcus said finally. His voice softened, but his eyes stayed firm. "She got laid off after 20 years at the same factory. They replaced her with machines, then denied her severance. She didn't know her rights, and no one would take her case because she couldn't pay. I watched her cry at the kitchen table, sir, and I couldn't do a thing. That stuck with me. I don't want families like mine to feel powerless." Harrington studied him, his expression unreadable. "So you want to fight for the little guy?" "Yes, sir." "You realize," Harrington said, his tone sharpening, "that the system isn't built to make that easy? That even if you make it into law school, which is a mountain on its own, you'll face professors, classmates, and later judges and clients who will look at you and see only where you came from. You're black, you're broke, and you're carrying the kind of baggage they don't respect. You sure you're ready for that kind of fight?" Marcus's jaw tightened. He'd heard all those warnings before, but never from a man like Harrington. "With respect, sir, I've been fighting since the day I was born. Nothing about me has ever been easy, but I'm still here, and I'm not giving up." The room fell quiet again. Something in Marcus's tone, something in the unflinching way he met Harrington's eyes brought back memories the older man had buried for years. Harrington had grown up with money, yes, but not without struggle. His father had been harsh, pushing him to succeed, telling him every day that weakness was a sin. Harrington had learned early that to survive, you had to be ruthless. Yet looking at Marcus, he felt a flicker of something else. Grit. Raw and unpolished, but real. He leaned back in his chair, letting out a slow breath. "Most people talk about what they want. You're the first I've seen in a long time who's bleeding for it." Marcus blinked. He didn't know what that meant. He didn't know if it was a compliment or just another test. Harrington stood and walked toward the door. Marcus's chest tightened. "This is it. He's walking out. I'll be fired in the morning." But Harrington stopped with his hand on the knob. He looked back. "Bring that notebook to my office tomorrow. Noon sharp. Don't be late." And then he was gone. Marcus stood frozen, the silence swallowing him whole. He stared at the door as if it might explain what just happened. His pulse was racing. His palms were damp. Did Harrington just give him another chance? Or was this some elaborate setup to fire him face to face in the daylight? He didn't know. But one thing was clear. Tomorrow, his life could change. The next day, Marcus barely slept. He went home at dawn, collapsed on the worn-out couch in his mom's small apartment, and tried to explain as little as possible. His mom worried easily, and the last thing he wanted was for her to lose faith in him. He told her only that Mr. Harrington had spoken to him and wanted to see him again. She looked at him with tired but hopeful eyes and said, "Then you make sure you go, son. God don't send opportunities twice." At 11:45, Marcus stood outside Harrington's office on the top floor of the building. His uniform was washed and pressed as best as he could manage. His shoes were still scuffed, his hands calloused, but he carried his notebook like a shield. The receptionist gave him a strange look when he said his name, but she picked up the phone, listened, then nodded. "Go in, he's expecting you." Marcus pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside. Harrington's office was vast, floor to ceiling, windows with the city, stretched out like a map below. Leather chairs, shelves of books that looked like they'd never been touched. Harrington sat behind a polished oak desk, reading glasses perched low on his nose. "You're on time," he said without looking up. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the thundering of his heart. "Sit." Harrington gestured to the chair across from him. Marcus sat, clutching his notebook. Harrington finally looked up. "Show me what you've been working on." Marcus slid the notebook across the desk. Harrington opened it and skimmed through, his eyes flicking over the cramped handwriting. He asked questions, real ones. Why this case? What's the significance of this precedent? How would you argue against this ruling? Marcus answered each one carefully, his nerves slowly giving way to confidence. He'd studied these cases until his eyes burned. He knew them like the back of his hand. At one point, Harrington leaned back, a hint of a smile tugging at his mouth. "You know, I've seen law school graduates who couldn't explain this half as well as you just did." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. He lowered his eyes, not sure how to respond. Harrington closed the notebook and pushed it back. "You've got brains, Carter. No denying that. But brains aren't enough. You need access, resources, people who open doors instead of closing them." Marcus's chest tightened. Was this the part where Harrington told him the dream was impossible? That he'd better accept his lot? But Harrington leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. "I'm not in the business of charity, but I do recognize talent when I see it. And I don't waste potential. So here's my question to you. If I gave you the chance, just the chance, what would you do with it?" Marcus stared at him. His heart pounded so hard it almost drowned out the words. This was it. The moment everything hung on. He drew in a breath and answered with the only truth he knew. "I'd fight, sir. Harder than anyone else. I'd make sure you never regretted it." Harrington held his gaze for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Good. Because I don't give second chances. And I sure as hell don't waste first ones." The office was quiet, but Marcus could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He'd just laid bare his dream to the most powerful man he had ever met. And now he sat waiting for the verdict. William Harrington leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers, studying Marcus like a man studies a stock before deciding to invest. Finally, he said, "All right, Carter. Here's what's gonna happen. You'll keep your job, but not as a janitor. That's a waste of your time. You're going to work for me directly." Marcus blinked. "Sir? You'll be an assistant in this office. Entry level, but it'll pay more than cleaning floors. You'll help organize documents, do research, and sit in on meetings if I say so. And in return, I'll sponsor your prep for the LSAT. Tutors, study materials, whatever you need. If you pass, I'll help you get into law school. But understand this. You fail. You quit halfway, you slack off, it's done. No more chances. Do you understand me?" Marcus's throat tightened. He could barely breathe. "Yes, sir. I understand. I won't let you down." Harrington gave a sharp nod, then stood, already shifting into business mode. "Good. Start Monday, now go. I've got a board meeting in 10. Marcus stood too, clutching his notebook like it was a lifeline. He wanted to say thank you, wanted to pour out the gratitude swelling inside him, but the words stuck in his chest. All he managed was a hoarse, "Thank you, Mr. Harrington." For the first time, Harrington's eyes softened. Just a flicker, gone as quickly as it came. "Don't thank me yet, Carter. Just prove me right." The next weeks felt like stepping into another world. Marcus swapped mop buckets for spreadsheets, dustpans for case files. He came to work in pressed shirts his mom had ironed at night, his tie slightly crooked, but his back straight with determination. Harrington was relentless. He demanded precision, speed, and discipline. But he also opened doors. When a corporate lawyer came in for a meeting, Harrington motioned for Marcus to sit quietly at the side. When the lawyer mentioned a recent Supreme Court case, Harrington surprised everyone by asking, "Carter, what's your take on that ruling?" Marcus swallowed his nerves and answered. The lawyer blinked, then nodded slowly. "Not bad. Kid knows his stuff." Moments like that lit a fire in him. For the first time, people who had power, who had influence, were seeing him not as a janitor, not as background noise, but as a mind. At home, his mom watched with quiet pride. She saw the way he came through the door later each night, tired but glowing. She saw the law books stacked higher on the kitchen table, the way his sisters looked at him with wide eyes, whispering Marcus is going to be a lawyer. Still, doubt crept in sometimes. Late at night, when the house was finally quiet, Marcus would stare at the dense LSAT prep books and wonder if he was in over his head. He'd think about the cost of law school, about being one of the only black students in lecture halls full of privilege, about all the ways the system could still shut him out. But then he'd remember his mom at the kitchen table, her hands shaking over a termination letter she couldn't fight. He'd remember Harrington's sharp eyes across the desk, saying, "Don't thank me yet. Prove me right." And he'd keep going. Months passed. The day of the LSAT came. Marcus walked into the testing center with his head high, his heart pounding like a drum. He thought of every night spent under the weak glow of his phone flashlight, every note scrawled in that battered notebook, every word Harrington had thrown at him to test his resolve. When the results came back weeks later, Marcus opened the email with trembling hands. And there it was, a score high enough not just to apply, but to compete at good schools. He sank onto the couch, the tears slipping down before he could stop them. His mom pulled him into a hug, whispering, "I told you, baby. God don't send opportunities twice. You took it." When he told Harrington, the older man only nodded once. "I expected nothing less. Now we start the next battle." Together they worked on applications. Harrington wrote letters of recommendation that carried weight Marcus could never have dreamed of. He called in favors, set up interviews, and when one admissions board questioned Marcus's unconventional path, Harrington leaned in and said, "You'd be a fool not to take him. He's the hungriest student you'll ever see." And they listened. Marcus was accepted into a law school that fall. Not the easiest, not the cheapest, but one with a name that opened doors. The day before he left, Marcus stopped by Harrington's office. He stood in the doorway, watching the man who had once nearly fired him, who had instead given him a chance. "I don't know how to thank you," Marcus said quietly. Harrington didn't look up from his papers. "By graduating, by becoming the lawyer you said you'd be, and by remembering where you came from. That's thanks enough." Marcus smiled faintly. "I won't forget, ever." For the first time, Harrington looked up. His eyes held something Marcus had only seen once before, that flicker of softness. "Good, because people like you remind me that this city still has fighters left. Don't let the world change that." Marcus left with those words carved into his heart. Years later, when Marcus Carter stood in a courtroom wearing a suit instead of a uniform, speaking with the calm authority of a man who knew both struggle and triumph, there were people in the gallery who whispered, "That's the janitor's kid, isn't it? The one who cleaned our floors?" And Marcus only smiled, because he knew the truth. He wasn't just the janitor's kid anymore. He was proof that dignity, grit, and belief could bend the course of a life. And somewhere in a corner office overlooking the city, William Harrington read the news of Marcus's first big case win. He set the paper down, leaned back in his chair, and allowed himself the rarest of smiles. Because sometimes, the richest thing a millionaire can give isn't money, it's belief. And what happens next? Well, that surprises everyone.